Good morning. I'm Steve Shafer, Chief Operating Officer of A.O. Smith, and let me start by just a quick introduction to A.O. Smith just for context. Now, if you're from the Milwaukee area, you probably think of A.O. Smith as maybe the company that makes car frames. We had a very big operation up on the north side of town. Lots of folks come up to me as a new person to Milwaukee and they'll say the relative who worked at A.O. Smith, or I grew up in the community with A.O. Smith. So we have very deep roots here in the Milwaukee community. If you grew up in Wisconsin, maybe on a farm, you might know A.O. Smith for the blue harvester silos, right? A.O. Smith, in fact, is a company that has transformed itself many, many times. We celebrated last year our 150th year anniversary of being in business. We have changed over and over again. And like most companies who have made it for 150 years, like maybe some of those companies that still survived in Germany, we've had to change. We've had to change to still be relevant. And today, making what matters has led us to the water industry, in the water sector. And we've become a water technology company. So we make water heaters, we make water filtration products. Water is a commodity that we see as being very valuable and important for all of us in the years ahead. So that's how we've transformed ourselves into a water company. I'm sure there's more transformations for us ahead to be around for another 150 years. We have 12,000 employees, much less of them here in the Milwaukee area, but like I said, we still have deep roots here. Close to $4 billion in sales, and we do business all around the world. And in particular, here in North America, China, and India, and that'll be part of my conversation here today as well. So I've got three topics I thought I'd cover. One is just our perspective as we head into 2025, some of the factors that Mike was talking about in terms of things that are kind of going to impact the economic situation here in the U.S. So I'll talk a little bit about our perspective on that. I'll talk about the role of innovation. And innovation is a word that's been around and obviously a very big part of the manufacturing sector for a long time. But how do we think about innovation at A.O. Smith, and in particular to help us navigate some of the trends in 2025? And then my final topic, I'll just give a little bit of insight of how we're looking at some of the other big economies in the world, in particular China and India, where we've made big investments and are building a water technology business in those parts of the world. So first off, some of the economic and macro trends. So in our business, we have actually a very stable base here in the U.S., which is tied to water heater replacement. Roughly 80 to 85% of water heaters that are sold to replace a current water heater, because really nobody likes to take a cold shower more than once. And so that provides an enormous amount of stability for our business. The other part of our sector tends to be tied to new construction, so residential and commercial. And as we come into the year, I'd say we're somewhat cautious about what that will look like. I think in residential, maybe a little bit more optimistic around single-family homes. Multifamily homes maybe a little bit more suppressed, as it has been for this past year, but pretty muted growth. And I think long term, there's still a housing challenge here in the U.S. that needs to be addressed, but we don't see that necessarily moving, or we're not planning for it to move in a meaningful way for 2025. Commercial, some activity, we've seen that kind of move up and down, maybe a little bit more optimistic of what could happen there. So it sounds pretty stable, low single digit, maybe flat growth, but I can tell you as we plan for the year of 2025, it feels like a year that you have to just prepare yourself for more change and more disruption. And any of you that have been running a business over the last 5-6 years, I think we've all gotten used to the idea that every year comes in and there's more disruption, there's more change that we have to respond to. And I think we're thinking about 2025 no differently. Obviously, we may be wrong around what we think our macroeconomic environment will be like, but also many of the policy factors that Mike touched upon could have pretty meaningful implications for our business. Tariffs could significantly influence how we manage our supply chains. Regulation, which has a big impact on how we think about technologies and investments we need to make, are kind of very uncertain right now. What are the regulations going to be? Regulations that are on the books, are they going to change? Are the timing going to change? So we have to be preparing for that uncertainty as well. And just overall government spending. There's been an enormous amount of spending in our sector that has driven some growth and investment. Is that going to change? Is that going to get clawed back? So we have some big uncertainties out there that we have to prepare for at A.O. Smith. And I think our strategy has been, we want to make the investments to make sure we win regardless of outcomes. And that's a pretty big commitment. And it helps to be a company that really thinks long term. But the reality is, some of these things, they will impact our business, and some of the things may be more beneficial than others, but we have to make sure we are going to win regardless of what those outcomes are. So if regulations change, if regulations slide, if regulations get removed, will we have the portfolio? Will we have the products that our customers are still going to look for? Will we have the technologies available that will meet regulatory hurdles at the timelines when they get put into effect? Do we have the access and the channels to market to address some of the changes that might be happening? These are all pretty meaningful investments, so while it might look like at a macro level, maybe the economy is pretty solid and pretty stable, there's a lot of decisions that we have to make sure that regardless of the outcome, we can compete and win. And that's the thing we can control. We can't control what tariffs are going to be put in place in what countries. We can't control what's going to happen at the Department of Energy or at the EPA. But regardless of the decisions that we make, we want to make sure we have thought it through and we know how to still compete and win. And that way, we're not counting on or hoping on some particular outcome. Like I said, it's a big investment, but I think it gives us confidence that we will be able to compete and win. And I actually think it's a way for our customers to have confidence in us because they have the same uncertainties. They don't know what's going to change, and they don't know what they're going to need from their suppliers, but they know A.O. Smith is making the investments to be prepared to win in any way, and that makes us actually, our value proposition to our customers stronger as well. So just food for thought for you this morning is, what are the things that are going to impact your business? Have you made the investments to make sure you can compete and win, even if you might have some preferred outcomes over others? And that way, I think you'll actually find you create a lot of value for your customers as well. A big part of how we ensure we are going to be competitive, regardless of outcome or scenario, is through innovation. And as I mentioned, A.O. Smith has a great history and culture of innovation. We have moved into new markets continually as we see new opportunities, or as some markets and the innovation opportunities in those markets have started to have diminishing returns. So when there wasn't much more left to do in car frames, A.O. Smith moved on from car frames, right? There's plenty of innovation opportunity still within the water space. So we feel like we're well positioned for at least the medium and probably pretty long term to drive innovation in water technology. The last few years, that's what's led us to move into water treatment. We think not just being able to have access to hot water, but being able to have access to clean water has been really important. So again, it gives us some stability in uncertain times to constantly be moving forward into spaces where we think innovation plays an important role. Even within our core product groups, like water heaters, innovation is really important for us to balance against all of the uncertainty. So I mentioned we don't know how regulation will play out, how government funding will play out. Well, we believe a technology like heat pumps, which drives an enormous amount of efficiency in how you heat water, will play a role. The long-term view, the long-term arc on it is it will be a technology we need to be good at, and we have to have capacity for to serve the market. Now, I don't know when the regulation is going to be put into effect. I know what's on the books today. That might change. I don't know how much funding the government's going to put behind it. I don't know whether that's going to happen at the federal level or whether that's going to be happening state by state in California and New York and Texas. But we believe in the long arc of the innovation around that technology is going to play some sort of role. So it's really important we tap into our innovation roots as a company and make sure we can step in and make sure we have the products that people need. Same with, we're a tank water heater company. There's a consumer trend around tankless. We need to step into that and make sure we have the products to compete and win in that space. So again, it's a really big investment for a company. Within your businesses, you have to determine whether all those investments make sense. But I think innovation and being able to think long-term and make those types of investments to allow you to compete and win regardless of outcomes is another way that you can sort of counterbalance uncertainty. Final topic, maybe I'll just give a few words around China and India. These are two businesses in China, one that we've been investing in over the last 30 years. We have a very large, over $800 million business in China, again, in the water heating and water treatment space. We've been recently making significant investments in India. And the reason I'm highlighting those two markets is we believe that as a company that brings clean, hot water to people and improves people's lives, you got to be where the people are. And there's a lot of people in China and in India. And I'll first maybe talk a little bit about China. As I mentioned, we've been there a long time. Our model is we go into a market, we develop local leadership, we develop products tailored for that market, and we build a brand around that. And that's what we've done in China. And I will tell you, while the rhetoric in the headlines around the China and the US relationship, it looks scary. For those companies that have been there a long time, I don't think it's nearly as scary. Because one thing, and I've actually ran a business in China, I ran 3M's business in China for a number of years, lived in Shanghai. 3M also, like A.O. Smith, long-time participant in China with local leaders. You know how to navigate some of those uncertainties. It's a very practical economy. You can get things done. So from our standpoint, it's scary. The rhetoric can have you concerned, but we're very confident that we can navigate through that because we have a long history there. Now, it is sector dependent, right? So we're in a sector that's not in the crosshairs of the geopolitical debate. We're actually improving lives in China, which is very well aligned to the Chinese policy, and we make in China for China, right? So those are some characteristics that help. If you weren't in China today and you're thinking about getting into China, it's probably not worth the risk. But for those companies like A.O. Smith that have been there a long time, built a great company, built a great brand with local leaders, it's not nearly as scary. It's certainly a very, very challenging economy right now. But even the Chinese consumers, they have savings. They are spending in certain areas. The housing construction market, which is the one that we're closely tied to, is probably one of the most suppressed, and that'll take some time. But again, as a long-term thinking company, we know the China economy will work through that. Probably the most challenging thing about doing business in China is just competing in China. There's a lot of competitors, and Chinese companies are getting very good, and they're very aggressive. So from our standpoint, geopolitics, we won't overreact to. The economy eventually will come back, and our focus is how do you actually compete against a set of competitors who are actually getting very, very capable and know their local market very well. India, for us, is in a very different place, and I think how we build the India market won't look the same. I think we're looking for a similar outcome. We think over time that economy is organizing itself, will continue to grow, will continue to urbanize, the middle class will continue to emerge. So we're following a path there. We recently just made an acquisition to help get us more scale. But again, in the water heating, water treating space where we feel like we bring a lot of technology, a lot of capability, and we're doing that with a similar approach in that it's about a local team, local products to local tastes. And so that's something we're very excited about for the future. And I think, again, it really helps on some of these big global scale issues that we're doing this for the long term. We lost money in China for many, many years to eventually get to a place where we have one of the strongest brands and strongest presence there. India will be also a very long time horizon, long arc, but we're confident that it's a really attractive market for the areas where we compete in. I thought I'd just wrap up with 3 predictions. Been asked to kind of give 3 predictions, and since it's a economic group, I'm going to go out there and give my own view of some of the economic indicators that Mike I got to do the same kind of qualifier. Don't invest on my advice, right? Think lawyer disclaimer. I'm going to have less data, I know, than Mike has, so I'd go with his guidance on anything. But I'll give a couple of economic ones, and I'm going to give one sports one, because when you're predicting something, it feels like a good sports prediction is good, too. So on the economic front, one is, while we're very cautious going into the year, I think macro level, it's going to be a really good 2025. And I think there's an element that we see in our business where there's still, regardless of whether you're left or right in terms of economic policies and what you think is best for the economy, there's still this funding overlap that, I fully anticipate with the new administration, they'll try to get after that and try to cut some of that back. There's a spillover that will happen that I think will still spur some investment, and some of those investments I think are going to start to materialize that have been many years in the making. And at the same time, I think you're getting some of the benefits of the forward-looking optimism that maybe some of the new policy decisions are doing. So it could be a really nice year where that kind of comes together. It won't probably last long, but I think 2025 could be a really positive kind of economic outcome year. Again, we're planning for maybe more uncertainty in that, but that's just maybe a personal view. I'm hopeful for what 2025 could be because of that reason. And then I think on the stock market, I've probably been very cautious about the valuations, but I actually think that there's a chance this year, if you have that positive economic sort of sentiment, that we could see a kind of a continuation of an even bigger bull run on equities, as maybe earnings actually really help support it. I don't know if valuations can go up, but earnings could help support it. And right now the stock market's been so concentrated on some of those big tech companies and the Mag 7, and there's room there for more companies, I think, to really deliver on earnings and to really help support a next wave of that. So again, don't invest on any of my advice, and certainly I don't have nearly the data that Mike has, but that's just a little bit instinctually of some of the things that I feel and hear as we think about running our business. Last thing, sports prediction. So this time of year, right, we should be talking Super Bowls. I'm predicting Buffalo Bills, and let me give you my rationale. And if you don't have a horse in the race yet, please, I'm advocating for the Bills. I'm from upstate New York. Now, but I'm not a Bills fan. I'm a New York Giants fan. Whoa. All right. I mean, there wasn't a Packers-Giants rivalry that I was aware of, but maybe some Eagles fans out there. So in my lifetime, the Giants have won 4 Super Bowls. And I have no regrets at all, and I hope most of you would support me when I say I'm thrilled that we beat the Patriots twice. Because the last thing the world needed was Tom Brady with 9 Super Bowl rings, right? So I have no regrets about Giants doing that. But as an upstate New Yorker, I always felt pretty bad about taking away the Bills' best chance of ever winning a Super Bowl, if you remember back. And it was on a final field goal. And being from upstate New York, I know Buffalo is a tough town, a town with a lot of pride. And I'd love to see them come back and make me feel a little bit better as a Giants fan that they get their Super Bowl. I also would feel better knowing that the Philadelphia Eagles, my arch rival, don't have a chance at the Super Bowl. So those would be my 3 predictions. Great to have a chance to come speak with you today. I am, as I said, new to the Milwaukee community, so I look forward to getting to know more of you in the coming years. Thank you.